And I'm like, girl, he was racist. Diversity is a very sensitive topic for many people, but especially for people on the internet, and even more especially for people in the book community, because a lot of us don't go outside, and you can really tell. So I might be opening a can of worms by making this video, and I figured if I say anything stupid and end up getting canceled, I might as well get paid for it. So this video is sponsored by Squarespace, which is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Squarespace is a platform that allows you to make your own websites and online stores with a full range of benefits like marketing tools and analytics. You can pretty much do whatever you want with your website, like collect donations or set up email campaigns or do social sharing. My favorite thing about Squarespace is that they have so many beautiful templates for any type of website. So if you are interested, you can head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, you can go to squarespace.com/readwithcindy to save 10% off of your first purchase of your domain. And to get that discount, all you need to do is use my code readwithcindy. Before I dive into detail about the two books, I'll just answer the question in this video title on a general level, because every now and then I get a message or a comment on a video from someone who's working on a story, and they ask me if I think it's okay for them to write an Asian character, and they're always like, am I allowed to do that? Is my portrayal going to be seen as offensive or cultural appropriation? And to that, I'm always like, bitch, I don't know. Let me just call up the committee of chinks and we'll have a little meeting and bring a consensus to you. My personal hot take on this is that I think if a person wants to write about a character who has a different identity from them, they should be allowed to do that. Because when you don't allow someone to write something, that goes into this weird territory of censorship, and it can be kind of complicated on who is enough of an identity to write them. Because what if they're mixed race, or what if they came from that country but they don't identify as part of that race? Or even outside of race, what if their sexuality changes later? I remember I said in the beginning of last year, I started working on my novel that I decided would feature a sapphic relationship. And at the time I was saying, haha, isn't it funny how I made my characters gay even though I'm straight? Isn't it so ironic? And then the corona happened and the Rona got me thinking, and now I'm like, wait a minute, am I actually straight? I don't even know anymore. So I don't think people have the right to forbid anyone to write a character that is different from them. But I do think that if you end up writing a character who you don't identify with, like if you're a white author who decides to make your main character black, you gotta be ready to take the heat that comes with it. It's only natural for people to take a more skeptical look at how you're writing the characters. So if you're not taking the time to do your research and have sensitivity readers and actually make sure that you're representing the characters properly, and then you get lashback from it, you really only have yourself to blame for that, because you were the one who made that decision to write this character in the first place. You might even do all the right things and do your research and talk to people in that group, or maybe even donate to people in that marginalized group, and you could still get criticism for how you represented that character, because everyone has a different opinion. And if you can't handle the heat that comes with that, then I don't think you should complain about it, because that's what you're signing up for when you decide to write a character that comes from a marginalized group that you're not a part of. It just comes with the territory. Personally, I don't care if a white author decides to write a person of color, but I do think it is weird when they decide to write the oppression or the trauma as like the center point of the plot or the narrative. Like that white lady who wrote American Dirt about a Mexican woman who flees from her country to try to be an illegal citizen in the US. Why did you have to write that? That's kind of weird. That's like if I made my book focus on my main character being oppressed for being gay, and then like I titled it Lesbian Dirt, and then people are like, wait, but don't you like dick? And then I'm just like, no, you don't understand. I was so inspired from my vacation to Lebanon meeting all these Lebanese people. It's just weird, and it takes away opportunities from those authors who can write those things more authentically. But that's just my take on that. People might have different thresholds. Regardless, I don't think people should be relying on white authors to write diversely anyway. way, because that's like asking a fish to climb a tree. Like, they can try, but you're probably gonna be disappointed. I also am not interested in reading a book where a white author felt obligated to write people of color because of the pressure to write diversely. Like, I would rather have a bunch of white characters in a book than diversity that feels forced, because you can really tell when it feels forced. So it's just like, don't even bother. Like, what's the point? Anyway, my conclusion is you should just read authors of color and stop looking at the wrong places for what you want. So that is my general take on this question. But the purpose of this video is to not get into all the issues of diversity within the publishing industry or the book community or anything like that, because I feel like that is a complex subject. It would take too long to go over all the nuances, and I don't have the brain cells for that. But I think an easy way to look at the nuances of this conversation, though, is to actually narrow down the scope within examples of two books that were published last year by two popular white authors. One of them wrote more people of color, and the other one did not write barely any people of color. And issues have come up with both of them. And I think it's very interesting to see how those things played out differently for both of those books. So let's take a look at two different books: The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab and A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I think both of these authors are very skilled writers. I think they're super creative with their storytelling and their concepting. When I break these books down, I'm really just looking at the white components of this book and how that plays out into the way that we view diversity in books. Just because, I don't know, I just want to stir some shit up. Why not, right? So let's talk about The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue first. The premise of the story begins in France in 1714. It centers on a young woman who makes a bargain with this demon kind of creature where she wants to live forever and live an extraordinary life. But by making the deal, she actually curses herself because she gets what she wants. The downside is that nobody will remember her. So she'll meet someone and then they turn around or they sneeze or something and they're like, wait, who are you again? And she's like, no, I'm so emo because history will never remember me. The entire book covers her life for 300 years as she goes across centuries and continents and tries to see how she can leave her mark on the world. I feel like when you read this book, you are going to be either one of two people. One group of people, which I think is the majority of people, are the ones who really love this story. They think it's super deep. They think that it speaks to their soul. And then the other group of people who don't relate to this story might feel like this book has excessive contemplation to the point where it's very self-absorbed within Addie. So that's why I'm going to focus on this video. Let's talk about how white this story is and how that whiteness can be a hindrance to the story. But I also want to provide counter arguments to my own argument about how it could be a problem if V.E. Schwab had tried to make it less white. This is where things get kind of complicated because on one hand, like, I absolutely did not enjoy the book as much because it was so white, but then when I tried to think about how it would be less white, I can see how it can get kind of problematic. This might sound confusing, but let me try to explain. Okay, first, let's talk about how white it is and why it can be a problem that is so white. So our homegirl, Addie LaRue, has been living for 300 years and supposedly traveling the world. Except when we read about her journey throughout the book, we see flashbacks from the older years where she is in Europe, primarily in Paris and Amsterdam, Milan. Every now and then she's in London just to kind of mix it up. And then in present day, she is in New York for most of the time. The whole time that she is between those continents, you mainly see this very repetitive thing that happens where she bumps into someone and maybe there could be a potential connection that forms, except they forget about her and then she's super emo and sad about it, which is understandable. That shit sucks. You also see the other ways that she deals with the curse, like she is able to sleep into hotel rooms for free or steal things because nobody remembers her. She doesn't really deal with any of the consequences from that. You also see her dealing with the demon that cursed her in the first place. In present day, you see her meeting a boy from a bookstore and the plot really begins when that boy actually remembers her. And then you see them spend time together as they go around New York City, and that is as simply as I can put the things that she is up to throughout the book. So the weird thing about this is that you're supposed to be with her for 300 years. And you can kind of feel that because it does get repetitive where people forget about her over and over and then she just contemplates and becomes emo over that. But nowhere through all of these centuries of her existence does she mention any person of color, or barely even scratches the surface of all of the revolutions that have occurred during that period of time between the 1700s to today. Which is really weird because a lot of shit has happened during those 300 years, but the whole time she's just like, nobody remembers me. Oh, there's slaves being transported. Oh, there's a literal concentration camp going on. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see any of that shit. How is it possible that a girl can live for 300 years and not see a single person of color? Until present day, of course. In present day, she meets the main guy's coworker at the bookshop, who is this black girl. But the only description about her is that Addie constantly thinks about how stunning she looks like. Like literally every time this side character gets brought up, she just thinks, wow, this character is one of the most stunning people I've ever met. And it's like, okay, we get it. We got it the first 3 times you mentioned it. Don't worry, we don't think you're racist, okay? Yes, you think black people were beautiful. Okay, good for you. But where were all the other black people in the 300 years that you just have been through? How is it possible that a girl can live for 300 years and literally only travel between Europe, the UK, and the US? She spends most of her life in Europe, in France specifically, before in present day she moves to the US and decides to settle down in New York. That's it. That's like all we got from the story. And I'm like, girl, well, you were in Europe for 200 years. Asia was literally right there. Africa was down here. It would have been easier to just walk over to those other continents than to fly all the way across the ocean. Did she just pick one direction to travel and just stick with it the entire time? So the thing is, I don't expect every single race to be represented in every single book, or even include people of color in their books. It's just weird for this specific book because the story focuses on a woman being forgotten by history. Like the whole theme of it is that she can inspire things or be a muse for art or other people, or try to leave her mark in some way, but she'll never have her own story and people won't remember her. And this kind of theme is something that especially happens to people of color. And yet this whole story centers on Addie LaRue, a white woman. So when people see this as a powerful story that's so deep and meaningful and encompasses life, I can kind of see that, but only when it's limited to white feminism. And the thing is, white women play a large role in erasing people of color throughout history. So this is an example of how whiteness in a book can be an issue, because when a story is focused on the legacy and about people who are forgotten about throughout history, it seems almost ridiculous to totally leave out people of color and be completely fixated on this white woman who, systematically speaking, plays a large role in erasing those people of color. Her vision of this tragically beautiful life that she has led does not include colonialism, white supremacy, political turmoil. None of that fits within the aesthetic that she is trying to make in this book. There are times where historical figures are referenced throughout the story, like maybe she passed by them or they're just mentioned in general because she has lived long enough to know about them. The weird thing is, the people that were name dropped were primarily old white men. Shakespeare gets mentioned, Beethoven gets mentioned, Napoleon gets mentioned. There's even this one part where she's at a Parisian salon. She runs into Voltaire, which is like, oh my gosh, such a big deal because he's like this amazing writer who was such a pinnacle for art and culture. And I'm like, girl, he was racist. Like, he wrote a lot of anti-black shit. Are you gonna tell that beautiful black lady in the bookshop in New York City that you were a stan for Voltaire? So the fact that a lot of historical figures get name dropped throughout the book shows that the book is willing to expand itself a little bit to show a world that is a little bit bigger than Addie herself. But again, we're still limited by these white men, and a lot of racist white men too. So it's just not a good look. If you're gonna name drop a bunch of historical figures, why don't you name drop women and people of color? Why didn't she meet anybody like that throughout all the years of her life? Wouldn't the theme of this book be stronger if Addie had met women of color that were forgotten about in history? Because then that would have made a parallel to the curse that she was going through, to other people in real life who were forgotten about and who were erased. Wouldn't that have been like a way stronger message and would have actually made sense for the message that the book was trying to go for? So this is what I mean when I say that I can see how whiteness is an issue for this book, because now it has made this particular book so limiting. Imagine how powerful the book would have been if it had made more of an effort to connect Addie's story and Addie's conflict to actual conflicts that have happened in the real world. So that way she doesn't seem like an ignorant white girl that was just ignoring all of those things around her. The book doesn't really have a plot. It's more focused on creating this atmosphere and this aesthetic. And V.E. Schwab does write very beautifully and poetically. But the thing is, a lot of times we read these stories that can be so whimsical and magical, but then when we look at this aesthetic, it doesn't include people of color. Like, she'll have all these magical adventures in Paris and Amsterdam and Milan and New York City, but it's a very whitewashed aesthetic despite the fact that people of color exist in a lot of those cities. Especially in New York, dude, she did not see a single person of color in New York, besides the beautiful, stunning black woman that works at the bookshop. Also, she and the main guy got lunch at a bunch of food trucks. So she got some Korean tacos, she got some shawarma. So she knows her ethnic cuisine, but when it comes to people of color, she's like, who? I will give her credit though, because there is one mention from when she one time acted as a spy for the war. But then she gave up on that because even though she's immortal, she realized that she couldn't be invincible. So that was just like a one-time thing. I don't know, maybe that was accurate to white activism. You know, like when BLM happened and a bunch of white girls retweeted links and they were like, okay, I'm done. Then when they get called out for their racism in the past, they disappear, just like Addie LaRue. Oh my God, maybe this is accurate representation. Anyway, I have spoken a lot about how the overtly whiteness was a hindrance to this book, but let me provide a counter argument. I actually think it's a tough position for V.E. Schwab to be in with this type of story, because if you try to write Addie going to other countries and meeting other people of color, I could definitely see that easily going wrong. I can easily see Addie getting criticisms if we had seen her explore Asia or Africa or the Middle East. First of all, it can be seen as tokenizing, because if you add like one character to represent Africa and one character to represent Asia, that does not sound satisfactory. Plus, there's only so much that you can write about every single continent in one book. So the glimpses that we might have seen of other continents, if V.E. Schwab had included them, could have easily been seen as stereotyping, because that runs into the issue of her being in this one continent is now a representation of this entire continent. Imagine a white girl like Addie having adventures in Africa. That shit would not go over well. What the fuck would she even do in Africa? Pass out Bibles? Is she gonna be a fucking missionary? When she reflects upon her life and looks at all of these blurry photographs of all the memories that she's made there, is she gonna see an image of herself building a fucking orphanage in Africa, smiling in front of all of the impoverished black children? Are we really gonna go down that route? What would she even do in Asia? Is she gonna visit me in Vietnam and I'm gonna ask her, hey, why did your people colonize my people and you haven't talked about it for like 500 pages? And she's just like, oops, I gotta go to New York, bye. Don't worry, I'm gonna eat some pho from the food trucks and that's gonna be an homage to your people. I just don't think there is a satisfactory way for V.E. Schwab to write a story that incorporates non-white people in this type of plot. I mean, I think it can be done, but race is a very, very sensitive subject for people. My theory is that V.E. Schwab just didn't want to mess with it at all. She didn't want to open that can of worms. She didn't want to face all the controversy that would happen from it. I don't really blame her if she felt like she needed to stay in her lane. But here's a counter argument to my first counter argument. You see where things get complicated here? Okay, stay with me here. Yes, it would be very difficult for her to include all of those things and try to handle it in a sensitive manner. But you could argue that V.E. Schwab is a seasoned writer. This ain't her first rodeo. She has had years of experience writing. She has written tons of books before. Many of those books were primarily white. Why not, for this book, have her take the challenge of actually expanding her boundaries. Also, V. Schwab is very well off, so she definitely has the resources to travel and do her research and hire sensitivity readers and take in more time and focus on creating a story that would have felt more universal rather than limited within this white girl. But here's a counter argument for my counter argument for my other counter argument. Okay, stay with me here. Maybe V.E. Schwab just wanted to write her own story. When I was reading this book, even though I couldn't relate to it, I could tell that a lot of the things that she was putting into her book came from a very personal place. She was putting a lot of her own feelings and emotions and her own contemplations about life into this kind of story. So I wonder if it's fair to argue for her to expand her world a little bit by including people of color when maybe the focus of this book was not to show the world, but to literally just focus on Addie. It's more of like an introspective look at this one character instead of something that's trying to blanket the entire world and the legacy of other people. So if V. Schwab wants to make her own personal story with a character that she projects herself onto and is super personal to her, is it right for us to demand her to write something that would be not personal to her story when maybe that wasn't the purpose of her writing it in the first place? I don't think authors have an obligation to appeal to a wide audience. Sometimes authors can just write things for themselves only. And if we are in the belief that authors should stay in their own lane, like if you believe that white authors shouldn't bother writing people of color because then it would feel forced and they should just stick to whatever they want, then is it right for us to criticize V.E. Schwab if she has stayed in her own lane in this book? A lot of the issues and musings that Addie goes through, I assume, is personal to her. I think also V.E. Schwab spends most of her time in Europe and in the US. So she is really just writing based off of what she knows and what she has experienced. It's not her fault that she has not experienced the worldly cultures of Africa and Asia or the Middle East or whatever, because she was born as a white woman and she was born as a privileged white woman who grew up surrounded by arts and cultures that are specific to what Addie has seen. Isn't this just an example of her staying in her own lane and her avoiding pissing people off and forcing herself to writing something that she is not experienced with and she might not even be interested in? But then again, you could also argue that a prolific writer like V.E. Schwab has a responsibility to be more inclusive, especially for a story about a woman who is erased from history. Isn't it kind of tone deaf to not include any parallels or deeper reflections on actual groups of people who have been erased by history? Again, I can talk circles with this shit. So a question that I ponder every time I think about this book is, should she have written more people of color? And I honestly don't know. I think it could have made the book stronger if she wrote it well, but I don't know if she should have. I don't know if she's obligated to do that when there would have been so much backlash if she had tried to do it. And maybe that wasn't even the point of the story. And at which case, is it okay for a story to be devoid of people of color when that isn't the point? I don't know. I'm just asking a bunch of questions now. That's why I wanted to make this video, because I would be curious to hear what you think. I don't have an answer to this. I'm really just raising a bunch of questions so that you can figure out for me and I can just chill while the internet argues about it. Man, this video turned out to be way longer than I expected. I wanted to also tap into A Deadly Education because that book was a book that attempted to be more diverse and have intersectionality, but it actually got criticized for it. And so I wanted to look at the other side of the coin just to point out how complicated it can be when white authors do try to include people of color. But this video is getting too long, so maybe I'll just do a part 2 and we'll talk about that later. So in the meantime, let me know your thoughts on Addie LaRue and what V.E. Schwab should have done. What should she have done? What is like the best answer for this? I don't even know. You tell me. Hello, Editing Cindy here. I just wanted to bring up the point that I forgot to mention in the video. One of the things I said in the beginning of this video when I was speaking generally is that I don't want a white author to write people of color just out of obligation because they feel like they need to. So the fact that V.E. Schwab barely wrote any people of color tells me that maybe she most likely didn't care enough to add people of color, in which case I don't know if she should have added non-white characters in this book, because you don't want to read a story where the author felt like they had to write diversity, right? Like that just spoils the whole thing. So I wonder if it's okay for this kind of book to be so obviously whitewashed if the author doesn't really care about including those things. Maybe if she had included those things, we would have been easily able to tell that she didn't care at all, because maybe the writing wouldn't have been that great for those parts where she is traveling to different countries. Maybe the non-white characters would have been poorly developed because she doesn't care about them as much as she cares about Addie. In which case, I would definitely rather read this whitewashed version of history in the Addie LaRue book than one that does it terribly. So I don't know, very complicated things to consider. I would love to hear your opinion. I forgot to film an outro, so this is going to be my outro. Regardless, I hope you unsubscribe from my channel. Goodbye.